Deep in the Nevada desert, there is a line that has never been crossed. Not once since the 1930s, when the Colorado River was first walled off behind the Hoover Dam and Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in America, slowly filled. Every drought, every crisis, every dry year since, the water has never fallen below it. This summer, according to the federal government's own forecast, it will. And here is the detail that turns this from a drought story into something stranger. At the exact moment the Colorado River is about to do the one thing it has never done, the 7 states that share its water have walked away from the negotiating table without a deal. The rules that govern this river are expiring. The deadline to replace them has already passed. 40 million people depend on what happens next. And right now, no one is in charge. This is what the line is, why crossing it is now almost unavoidable, and what actually happens on the other side. Start with the number. The all-time record low for Lake Mead is 1,040 feet above sea level, set in July of 2022. The lowest the lake had ever been since it first filled almost a century ago. In June, the lake stood at 1,044 feet. That is about 4 feet of cushion. 4 feet at the start of the hottest, thirstiest months of the year. The Bureau of Reclamation, the federal agency that operates the dams, now projects the lake will reach 1,040 feet this July, matching the record, and then keep falling straight through it. The Las Vegas Review-Journal, which tracks these federal forecasts closely, reported that the lake is expected to slip below the 2022 record within weeks, and that the government's own studies show it falling as much as 29 feet below that old record within the next 2 years. Understand what locked this in. The Colorado River is fed by mountain snow, and this year, the snowmelt collapsed. In parts of the basin, the runoff that actually reached the river dropped by roughly 80%. The water that would have defended the record simply never came down from the mountains. So, the record is not in danger. The record is finished. The real question is what sits below it. Because a few feet under that line, there is another number. And that one comes with consequences. That number is 1,035 feet. It is not a symbolic line. It is a mechanical one. The Hoover Dam generates electricity by letting lake water fall through 17 massive turbines. But the lower the lake drops, the less pressure there is to spin them. Below 1,035 feet, only 5 of those 17 turbines can keep producing power. That threshold now sits less than 10 feet below where the lake is projected to be this summer. And it is not just Lake Mead. Upstream, its twin reservoir, Lake Powell, behind the Glen Canyon Dam, is sliding toward the same kind of threshold, the level engineers call the dead power pool, where electricity generation stops entirely. The situation there is already serious enough that Utah agreed to an emergency release of water from Flaming Gorge, a reservoir hundreds of miles away, just to prop Lake Powell up. Think about what that means. The system is now borrowing water from its own savings account to keep the lights on. Now, if you have spent any time on this side of the internet, you have probably seen videos claiming something even darker is about to happen. So let's be honest about that, because the truth is strange enough. You may have heard the phrase dead pool, the level where Lake Mead drops so low that water can no longer flow past the Hoover Dam at all. That level is 895 feet. The lake is still roughly 150 feet above it, and even the government's worst-case forecasts keep it well above that line for years. So no. The river is not about to stop flowing, and anyone telling you otherwise is selling fear, not facts. But here is the uncomfortable part. The realistic scenario does not need dead pool to be alarming. a record low with no bottom in sight, a hydropower system losing turbines, and states rationing a shrinking river. That is not a doomsday theory. That is the official projection. And it is arriving at the worst possible moment. Because the people who are supposed to manage this crisis just ran out the clock. Here is the situation almost nobody outside the Southwest is following. Everything about how this river is operated, how much water is released, who takes cuts, and when, runs on a set of rules agreed to back in 2007. Those rules expire at the end of this year. The federal government gave the 7 states of the Colorado River Basin a deadline of February 14, 2026 to agree on a replacement. The deadline came, the deadline went. No deal. And these states were not refusing to sacrifice. According to reporting on the negotiations, Arizona offered to cut its share of the river by 27%. Nevada offered 17%. California offered 10%. Cuts that size would have been unthinkable a decade ago, and it still was not enough to close the gap. So now the Department of the Interior is preparing to do the one thing everyone spent 4 years trying to avoid: impose a federal plan on the states with new operating rules due by October 1st. Sit with the phrase, "no one is in charge" for a second, because it is precise. It does not mean no one is working on the problem. It means the operating manual for the most important river in the American West expires in months. Its replacement does not exist yet, and the people writing it are no longer the people who live on the water. Whatever comes out of Washington in October, at least one state, maybe several, is going to consider it unacceptable. And disputes over Colorado River water do not get resolved quickly. They get resolved in court over years the river may not have. And underneath the politics sits the arithmetic that no agreement can escape. The Colorado River was divided up in 1922, during one of the wettest periods the region ever recorded. The river those negotiators split on paper was bigger than the river that actually exists, and the gap has been widening for a quarter century. Water experts have started using a blunt phrase for where this ends up: water bankruptcy. More promises than water. Every acre-foot that goes to a farm in Arizona is an acre-foot that does not reach a tap in Los Angeles or a turbine at the Hoover Dam. There is no version of the next deal where everyone keeps what they have. Someone, farms, cities, or the river itself absorbs the loss. That is why the negotiations collapsed, not because the states do not understand the problem, because they understand it perfectly. So here is what to watch between now and October. 3 things. First, the lake level itself. 1,040 feet is the line, and the federal projections have it falling this month. When it goes, you will be watching the lowest water in the reservoir's history. Second, the turbine threshold. 1,035 feet at the Hoover Dam. Every foot closer is measurable pressure on the power grid of the Southwest. And third, October 1st, the day the federal government publishes its plan for the river, and we find out whether the states accept it, or whether the American West spends the next decade fighting over water in a courtroom. Remember how this started. The line at 1,040 feet stood untouched for 90 years. It is about to fall in a single summer, and the people responsible for what happens next have not agreed on anything. We will be tracking every foot of it as it develops. If you want the updates, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, do you live in one of the 7 states that drink from this river? And who do you think should decide what happens to it? The states or Washington? Because 40 million people are about to find out.